Dr. Helen Carter led Ambassador Zthar to the ship's observation deck while the UES Liberty traveled through hyperspace toward Kepler 442b. The ambassador's crystal body continued, shifting through various shades of orange and yellow as he struggled to understand what he would soon witness. Helen had spent years studying alien psychology, and she could see that Zthar was experiencing something close to what humans would call anxiety. Ambassador, I think it would help if I explained some basic principles of human military thinking, Helen said as they settled into chairs facing the viewport. Stars streaked past in the familiar pattern of faster-than-light travel. Most species in the galaxy approach warfare as a formal activity with established rules and predictable outcomes. Zthar's translator chimed softly as he responded. Of course, Dr. Carter. Civilized warfare requires structure to prevent conflicts from becoming senseless slaughter. We have codes of honor, predetermined battle conditions, and agreements about acceptable targets. Without these frameworks, war becomes mere barbarism. That is exactly the problem, said a new voice from behind them. Colonel Ryan Hayes entered the observation deck carrying a cup of coffee and wearing casual uniform without rank insignia. He was a stocky man with graying hair and scars on his hands that spoke of extensive combat experience. His eyes held the calm alertness of someone who had survived many dangerous situations. Colonel Hayes commands our ground operations for this mission, Helen explained. Ryan has more experience with unconventional warfare than almost anyone in the human fleet. Ryan sat down across from them and took a sip of his coffee before speaking. Ambassador, the problem with civilized warfare is that it assumes both sides want to follow the same rules. It works fine when everyone agrees to play the same game, but what happens when one side decides to ignore those rules? That is why we have galactic enforcement mechanisms, Zthar replied. Species that violate warfare conventions face economic sanctions and military intervention from the Council. And how well has that worked with the Vorac? Ryan asked. They attack civilian targets without declaration, they are using hostages as shields, and they have ignored every diplomatic communication sent to them. Your civilized warfare system has completely failed to protect innocent people. Zthar's crystal structure flashed through several colors as he processed this uncomfortable truth. The Vorac had indeed violated multiple galactic conventions, but the Council's response had been slow and bureaucratic. Formal protests had been filed, committee meetings had been scheduled, and diplomatic solutions had been proposed. Meanwhile, human civilians remained in enemy hands facing uncertain fates. So what is your alternative? Zthar asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would disturb him greatly. We embrace chaos and use it as a weapon, Ryan said calmly. Look out that viewport, Ambassador. What do you see? Zthar looked through the transparent aluminum and saw the normal pattern of stars during hyperspace travel. I see stellar formations during faster-than-light transit. Exactly. You see order and predictability. You know where those stars are, what direction we are traveling, and when we will arrive at our destination. That knowledge gives you comfort because it allows you to plan and prepare for known conditions. Ryan activated a small holographic display that showed tactical formations used by various galactic species. Every military in the galaxy operates on the same principle. They want predictable conditions, known variables, and controllable outcomes. They study their enemies, develop countermeasures, and execute predetermined strategies. This approach has served civilized species well for thousands of years, Zthar pointed out. It has served them adequately when fighting other civilized species, Helen corrected. But humans evolved under different conditions. Our homeworld was filled with predators and disasters that could not be negotiated with or reasoned with. We learned to survive by adapting faster than threats could develop countermeasures. Ryan stood and walked to the viewport. The Vorac have studied human military encounters from the past 50 years. They know our ship designs, our standard tactical formations, our communication protocols, and our preferred strategies. They have prepared defensive positions and countermeasures based on that analysis. So they should have significant advantages, Zthar observed. They would if we were planning to fight the way they expect, Ryan said with a slight smile. But we are not going to use any of those known tactics. We are going to do things they have never seen before and create situations they cannot possibly have prepared for. Helen activated another display showing psychological profiles of Vorac command structures. Ambassador, your species thinks of warfare as a contest between opposing forces using established methods. Humans think of warfare as a problem that needs to be solved using any available tools. What kind of tools? Zthar asked with growing apprehension. Everything, Ryan replied. We use their expectations against them. We exploit their cultural assumptions, we attack their decision-making processes, and we create conditions that their training never prepared them to handle. Most importantly, we refuse to fight on terms that favor them. The ship's communication system announced that they would drop out of hyperspace in 4 hours. Zthar watched Ryan and Helen exchange another one of those meaningful human looks that seemed to convey complex information instantly. Let me give you a specific example, Helen said. The Vorac command structure is based on hierarchical authority and predetermined responses to standard threats. Their officers are trained to follow established protocols and refer unusual situations up the chain of command for decisions. That sounds like a reasonable military organization, Zthar commented. It is reasonable for fighting reasonable opponents, Ryan agreed, but we are going to create situations that are completely unreasonable. We will hit them with simultaneous attacks from impossible directions using equipment they did not know existed. Their commanders will face decisions that their training never covered, and their protocols never anticipated. While their command structure becomes paralyzed trying to process unknown threats, Helen continued, our forces will be operating under what we call mission-type orders. Each unit knows their objective and has authority to achieve it using whatever methods work best under changing conditions. Zthar felt his translator working overtime to process concepts that had no equivalent in Altarian military thinking. You are describing organized chaos. How do you maintain coordination without central control? The same way a flock of birds maintains formation without a flight leader, Ryan said. Individual units respond to local conditions while maintaining awareness of overall objectives. It requires more training and initiative from lower-level personnel, but it creates a military force that can adapt faster than any centralized command system. But surely there are disadvantages to such an approach, Zthar protested. Without clear chains of command and established procedures, how do you prevent confusion and friendly fire incidents? There are risks, Helen admitted. Human military doctrine accepts higher short-term uncertainty in exchange for better long-term outcomes. We would rather deal with the problems of rapid adaptation than the problems of rigid predictability. Ryan returned to his seat and leaned forward. Ambassador, let me ask you something. When the Vorac attacked your colonies, what was your government's response? We filed formal protests with the Galactic Council and requested mediation through established diplomatic channels, Zthar replied. And how long did that process take? Approximately 6 standard weeks for the initial hearings and preliminary recommendations. 6 weeks, Ryan repeated quietly. In 6 weeks, those hostages could be dead, relocated to unknown locations, or broken by interrogation and psychological pressure. Your civilized response prioritizes procedure over people. Our methods ensure that conflicts are resolved according to law and precedent, Zthar said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Our methods ensure that our people come home alive, Ryan replied. Everything else is secondary to that objective. Helen stood and gestured toward the viewport where stars were beginning to slow their streaking pattern. Ambassador, in about 3 hours you will see humans wage war according to human principles. I cannot prepare you for everything you will witness because even we do not know exactly what will happen. That uncertainty is not a flaw in our planning. It is the foundation of our strategy. Zthar felt his crystal body shift to deep purple as existential dread settled over him. He was about to witness something that would either prove human methods superior or confirm his worst fears about their barbaric nature. Ambassador Zthar stood at the docking port of the human ship and felt his crystal skin change colors from calm blue to worried yellow. He had spent 3 full cycles studying these strange beings called humans before the Galactic Council sent him on this mission. The reports about human warfare made no sense to any civilized species in the galaxy. How could creatures who seemed so friendly and helpful in trade talks become so dangerous in battle? The airlock hissed open, and Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward with his hand extended. Zthar knew about this human custom called a handshake, but the firm grip still made his translucent body ripple with discomfort. Jake was a tall man with short brown hair and kind eyes that seemed to see everything around him. His uniform was clean, but Zthar noticed small scratches on his hands that spoke of someone who worked with tools and weapons. Welcome aboard the UES Liberty, Ambassador, Jake said with a smile that showed white teeth. We are honored to have someone from the Altarian Collective witness our operations. I hope this mission will help our species understand each other better. Zthar managed to speak through his translator device, which turned his crystal chimes into human words. Captain Morrison, I appreciate your hospitality, but I must admit I am confused about what I will see here. The reports we received about human military action seem to contradict everything we know about proper warfare. Jake nodded and gestured for Zthar to follow him into the ship. The corridors were busy with crew members moving quickly but not in panic. Each human seemed to know exactly what they needed to do. Their movements reminded Zthar of a hive mind species, but he knew humans were individuals. This coordination without central control was another thing that puzzled the galaxy about these creatures. I understand your confusion, Ambassador, Jake said as they walked. Most species in the galaxy have very specific rules about how wars should be fought. Formal declarations, arranged battlefields, predetermined outcomes based on fleet sizes and resource counts. We humans see things differently. They entered a large room filled with displays showing star maps and ship positions. Lieutenant Lisa Brooks turned from her station and walked over to greet them. She was a woman with blonde hair tied back in a tight ponytail, and sharp green eyes that seemed to calculate everything she looked at. Her uniform had patches that Zthar recognized as tactical specialization marks. Ambassador, this is Lieutenant Brooks, our tactical officer, Jake said. Lisa can explain the situation we are heading into. Lisa activated a holographic display that showed a planet surrounded by ships. The world is called Kepler 442b, and it has been home to human colonists for about 5 years. They built farms and small cities there and were living peacefully. 3 days ago, the Vorac Empire attacked without warning. Zthar studied the display and his skin shifted to dark orange, which indicated deep concern. The Vorac were known throughout the galaxy as aggressive, but they usually followed standard warfare protocols. They would issue challenges, allow for negotiations, and accept surrenders according to galactic law. The Vorac have taken about 1,200 civilian hostages, Lisa continued. Our intelligence reports suggest they are using these innocent people as leverage to claim the entire star system. They have demanded that all human presence be removed from this sector of space. This was exactly the kind of situation that civilized species handled through established procedures. The attacking force would state their demands. The defending force would either meet those demands or offer acceptable alternatives, and the matter would be resolved through negotiation or formal combat between military units only. Civilians were never supposed to be involved in warfare. What response has your government authorized? Zthar asked, though he was beginning to dread the answer based on the reports he had read. Jake's friendly expression became harder and colder. Ambassador, we are going to get our people back. All of them. Alive. The simple certainty in Jake's voice made Zthar's crystal body flash through several colors of alarm. Captain Morrison, surely you understand that the proper response is to negotiate with the Vorac commanders, or perhaps offer tribute for the safe return of the hostages. Direct military action against a superior force holding civilian prisoners would result in massive casualties. Lisa and Jake exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes without words. This was another human trait that confused alien observers. They could share complex thoughts with tiny facial expressions and body movements. Ambassador, Lisa said carefully, I think there might be some misunderstanding about how humans approach these situations. We do not negotiate with entities that threaten our civilians. We do not pay tribute to kidnappers. We do not accept the loss of innocent lives as an acceptable cost of doing business. But the Vorac have superior numbers and defensive positions, Zthar protested. They have studied human tactics from previous encounters and prepared countermeasures. Any direct assault would be costly and likely to fail according to standard military analysis. Jake walked over to the display and pointed at the enemy ship formations. You are absolutely right, Ambassador. If we fought a standard battle using conventional tactics against prepared defenses, we would lose badly. The Vorac have indeed studied our previous encounters, and they think they know what humans do in war. And what do humans do in war, Captain Morrison? We cheat, Jake said with a grin that did not reach his eyes. We lie, we improvise, we break rules that other species think are sacred, and we use every advantage we can create or steal or imagine. The Vorac have prepared for civilized warfare, Ambassador. They are about to experience human warfare. Zthar felt his translator struggling to process the emotional undertones in Jake's words. There was no anger or hatred in the human's voice, but there was something far more disturbing. There was absolute confidence and a kind of predatory satisfaction that made the ambassador's crystal structure vibrate with instinctive fear. Dr. Helen Carter entered the room carrying a data pad and nodded politely to Zthar. She was an older woman with gray hair and calm brown eyes that seemed to see inside a person's mind. Her specialty patches indicated xenopsychology and cultural analysis. Ambassador, I have prepared some background materials that might help you understand what you're about to witness, Helen said. Human military doctrine is based on principles that most species find either incomprehensible or morally questionable. We have learned that the universe is not fair, and we have adapted our approach to conflict accordingly. What does that mean exactly? Zthar asked. It means we fight to win, Jake said simply. Not to prove our honor, not to follow ancient traditions, not to demonstrate our superiority. We fight to achieve our objectives with minimum cost to ourselves and maximum cost to anyone who threatens what we protect. Everything else is secondary. The ship's intercom crackled to life with an announcement that they would reach the target system in 6 hours. Zthar realized that in that short time he would witness something that would either revolutionize his understanding of warfare or confirm his worst fears about these peculiar humans. The attack began at exactly 0347 ship time, and Ambassador Zthar immediately understood why the galaxy feared human warfare. He stood in the command center of the UES Liberty, watching displays that showed tactical information from dozens of sources simultaneously. What he witnessed defied every principle of civilized military doctrine he had ever studied. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the Central Command Station coordinating an operation that appeared to have no coherent structure whatsoever. Human forces seemed to materialize from impossible locations using methods that violated basic tactical logic. Zthar watched in growing amazement as Sergeant Mike Thompson led a squad of armored soldiers through ventilation systems that should have been too narrow for human passage. How are they fitting through those spaces? Zthar asked Dr. Helen Carter, who was monitoring psychological warfare effects from her station nearby. Emergency compression gear and flexible armor plating, Helen replied without looking away from her displays. Mike's team spent 2 hours modifying their equipment specifically for this infiltration route. The Vorac designed their ventilation systems to prevent intrusion by standard galactic military equipment. But human equipment is not standard, Zthar observed with growing understanding. Nothing about human military operations is standard, confirmed Lieutenant Lisa Brooks from her tactical station. That is exactly the point, Ambassador. Every piece of equipment, every tactical approach, every operational method is customized for the specific mission requirements. On another display Zthar watched, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez emerged from underground tunnels that had not existed during the pre-mission intelligence briefings. Her team appeared behind Vorac defensive positions like ghosts rising from solid rock. The enemy soldiers spun around in confusion as humans materialized from directions they had not thought to guard. Those tunnels were not in the original reconnaissance data, Zthar pointed out. How did your forces create them so quickly? They did not create them, Jake said from his command position. They improvised them using mining charges, emergency shelter materials, and pure human stubbornness. Amy's team identified weak points in the underground geology and created passages using tools that were never designed for military engineering. Zthar felt his crystal structure vibrate with something approaching awe. You are telling me that Lieutenant Rodriguez built a tunnel system in less than 6 hours using improvised materials. Actually, it took closer to 4 hours. Amy's voice crackled through the communication system. The geology was more cooperative than we expected, and the Vorac never bothered to scan for subsurface activity. They assumed we would attack from predictable directions. The tactical display showed human forces appearing in 17 different locations across the planet's surface. None of these positions corresponded to standard military deployment patterns that any civilized species would recognize. Instead of forming battle lines or establishing defensive perimeters, the humans seemed to flow like water around Vorac's strongpoints. This appears to be complete chaos, Zthar said, though his tone suggested growing respect rather than criticism. Chaos that is carefully orchestrated, Colonel Ryan Hayes confirmed as he entered the command center wearing full combat gear. Every unit out there knows exactly what they are supposed to accomplish. They just have complete freedom to choose how they accomplish it. On the aerospace tactical display, Captain Ben Walsh's fighter squadron demonstrated another aspect of human military doctrine that baffled alien observers. Instead of engaging in formal dogfights or attacking predetermined targets, Ben's pilots were using the planet's electromagnetic storms as camouflage. They appeared to be flying through lightning itself. "How are your pilots surviving inside those electrical storms?" Zthar asked. "Standard fighter craft cannot operate in such conditions." "Standard fighter craft cannot," Lisa agreed. "But human fighters are equipped with electromagnetic shielding and storm navigation systems. Ben's squadron trained for 6 months learning to use natural phenomena as tactical advantages." Zthar watched. Ben's fighters emerged from storm clouds to attack Vorac aerospace patrols that had never seen anything like this approach. The enemy pilots tried to follow standard intercept procedures, but found themselves fighting opponents who appeared and disappeared like thunder itself. The Vorac pilots are trained for conventional aerial combat, Helen observed from her psychological analysis station. They have no cultural or tactical framework for dealing with adversaries who use weather as a weapon. "Weather is not a weapon," Zthar protested. "It is a natural phenomenon that affects all combatants equally." "Not if you know how to use it," Ryan replied. "Humans have been dealing with hostile weather for our entire evolutionary history. We learned to work with natural forces instead of fighting against them. That experience transfers directly to military applications." The ground tactical display showed Sergeant Thompson's team moving through the Vorac command facility like smoke through cracks in a wall. They appeared in corridors, disappeared into maintenance shafts, and reappeared in rooms that should have been secure. Each movement seemed random, but Zthar was beginning to see the pattern. "Your forces are not attacking military targets," he observed. "They are attacking the enemy's ability to think clearly." "Exactly," Jake said with satisfaction. "We could destroy their weapons and fortifications, but that would just force them to fight harder to protect what remained. Instead, we are destroying their confidence in their own defensive systems." As Zthar watched the displays, he saw human teams appearing in locations that the Vorac had considered absolutely secure. Food preparation areas, sleeping quarters, communication centers, and command bunkers all proved vulnerable to human infiltration methods. Each intrusion sent psychological shockwaves through the enemy force structure. "They are beginning to doubt everything they thought they knew about their own defenses," Helen reported. "Vorac commanders are receiving reports of human activity from areas that should be impossible to reach. Their certainty about controllable conditions is collapsing." Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system again. "Phase 2 tunnels are complete. We now have access to their main power distribution center and their primary water treatment facility." "You're attacking infrastructure," Zthar said with alarm. "Civilized warfare prohibits targeting civilian support systems." "We are not targeting anything for destruction," Jake corrected. "Amy's team is installing monitoring equipment and backup power systems. If the Vorac try to damage civilian infrastructure to spite us, we can maintain essential services remotely." This revelation struck Zthar like a physical blow. "You are not just attacking the enemy. You are preparing to protect civilian populations from their own captors." "Of course," Ryan said, as if this should be obvious. "The hostages are our primary concern. Everything else we do serves the objective of getting them home safely." On the communication display, Zthar could see reports flowing in from human units across the operational area. Each team reported successful completion of objectives that had not appeared in any formal planning documents he had been shown. Backup plans were being executed, contingencies were being implemented, and new opportunities were being exploited faster than any centralized command system could possibly coordinate. "How are your forces maintaining operational coherence without detailed central planning?" Zthar asked. "Mission-type orders and shared understanding of human values," Helen explained. "Every person out there knows that the ultimate goal is bringing our people home safely. They understand what humans will and will not do to achieve that goal. Within those parameters, they have complete authority to adapt their methods to changing conditions." Captain Walsh's voice crackled through the aerospace communication channel. "All Vorac air patrols have withdrawn to defensive positions around the hostage facility. They are no longer conducting offensive operations." "Confirmed," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from her underground position. Enemy ground forces are pulling back from outlying positions and concentrating around the central compound. Jake studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. Phase 1 complete. The Vorac have abandoned their distributed defensive strategy and consolidated their forces into a single defensive position. Is that good for your mission? Zthar asked. It is exactly what we wanted them to do, Ryan replied. Now they are all in one place where we can see them, predict their movements, and control their options. More importantly, they have voluntarily given up most of their tactical advantages. Zthar realized that what had appeared to be random chaos was actually a carefully orchestrated campaign to manipulate enemy decision-making. The humans had not simply attacked Vorac positions. They had attacked Vorac psychology and forced their enemies to react in predictable ways. You made them choose to concentrate their forces, he said with growing amazement. We made that choice appear to be their best available option, Helen confirmed. Now we move to Phase 2. 6 hours and 37 minutes after the operation began, it was over, and Ambassador Zthar found himself struggling to process what he had witnessed. The command center of the UES Liberty buzzed with post-mission activity as human officers compiled reports and coordinated the evacuation of rescued civilians. The speed and completeness of their victory defied every tactical analysis Zthar had ever studied. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Karen Lewis entered the command center carrying a data pad and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose worst fears had not materialized. She was a woman in her 50s with steady hands and calm eyes that had seen too much suffering to be easily surprised by anything. Her uniform bore patches indicating specialization in trauma medicine and battlefield surgery. Casualty report, Captain Jake Morrison requested from his command station. 12 wounded among our forces, none seriously, Dr. Lewis announced to the assembled officers and their alien observer. 3 minor burns from electromagnetic exposure, 6 cases of equipment-related bruises and scrapes, 2 soldiers with mild dehydration, and 1 sprained ankle from rappelling too quickly. All personnel will return to full duty within 24 hours. Civilian casualties, Jake asked with the tone of someone who truly cared about the answer. 0 fatalities. 0 serious injuries, Dr. Lewis continued. 43 cases of mild dehydration and malnutrition from inadequate care during captivity. 15 cases of anxiety and stress reactions, and 6 minor injuries from the evacuation process itself. All civilians are in stable condition and responding well to treatment. Vorac casualties, Colonel Ryan Hayes inquired as he removed his combat helmet and set it on a nearby table. Unknown but believed to be minimal, Dr. Lewis replied. Our forces report that most enemy personnel simply fled their positions when they realized their defensive systems had been compromised. There were no sustained firefights and very little direct combat. Zthar felt his crystal structure flash through several colors as he processed these impossible numbers. How is this possible? He asked in a voice that barely functioned through his translator. The Vorac had superior numbers, fortified positions, and 1,200 hostages as leverage. According to every tactical analysis, this should have been a siege lasting weeks with massive casualties on all sides. That would have been true if we had fought a conventional battle, Major Danny Clark said as he entered the command center still wearing his combat gear. Danny was a compact man with quick movements and alert eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. His equipment showed signs of recent use but no damage from enemy fire. Major Clark led our primary ground assault team, Jake explained to Zthar. Danny can give you a first-hand account of what happened down there. Danny accepted a cup of coffee from Dr. Lewis and took a long drink before speaking. Ambassador the Vorac prepared for the kind of war they understood. They studied our previous military encounters and built countermeasures for tactics we had used before. They positioned their forces to defend against standard assault patterns and equipped their soldiers to fight conventional human military units. So what did you do instead? Zthar asked, though he was beginning to understand the pattern. We gave them humans. Danny replied with a tired smile. Not human soldiers following? Standard military doctrine, but actual humans using human methods. To solve human problems, Zthar accessed his cultural database trying to understand the distinction Danny was making. What is the difference between human soldiers and humans? Human soldiers follow training and doctrine, Dr. Helen Carter explained as she joined their conversation. Humans adapt to whatever situation they encounter using whatever tools and methods are available. The Vorthak prepared to fight our military. They were not prepared to deal with our nature. Can you give me specific examples? Zthar requested. Sergeant Thompson's team did not assault the ventilation system, Danny said. They inhabited it. Mike's people moved through those passages like they were exploring caves for fun. They treated the enemy facility like an interesting puzzle to be solved, rather than a fortress to be conquered. Lieutenant Rodriguez did not attack from underground, Major Clark continued. She emerged from underground like some kind of geological phenomenon. Amy's team appeared in places where human presence should have been physically impossible according to Vorthak understanding of architecture and engineering. Dr. Carter activated a holographic display showing psychological analysis data from the operation. The most important factor was not what we did but how the Vorthak perceived what we did. They encountered humans in locations and situations that their training had taught them were secure. This created a psychological effect that no amount of conventional firepower could achieve. You destroyed their confidence in their own defensive systems, Zthar observed. We did more than that, Ryan said as he studied the tactical aftermath displays. We demonstrated that human beings cannot be contained or controlled by conventional military methods. Every assumption they made about predictable human behavior proved wrong. Zthar examined the timeline of events displayed on the command center screens. The entire operation took less than 7 hours from start to finish. How did you coordinate such complex activities across multiple battle zones without central micromanagement? We did not coordinate them, Jake replied. We enabled them. Every human unit understood their mission objectives and our shared values about protecting civilian lives. Within those parameters, they had complete authority to develop their own methods and adapt to changing conditions. But coordination without central control leads to chaos and confusion, Zthar protested. How did you prevent units from interfering with each other or duplicating efforts? Human beings are naturally social creatures, Dr. Carter explained. We evolved the ability to cooperate in small groups without hierarchical command structures. Military training enhances those natural abilities rather than replacing them with artificial systems. Lieutenant Lisa Brooks looked up from her post-mission analysis. Ambassador, every person involved in this operation spent months training together and learning to think like a team. They know each other's capabilities, preferences, and likely responses to various situations. That shared understanding allows for coordination without constant communication. The Vorthak military structure depends on central planning and predetermined responses, Ryan added. When we disrupted their command hierarchy by creating situations their protocols never covered, their entire organizational system became paralyzed. Dr. Lewis approached with another data pad, containing medical evaluations of the rescued hostages. Ambassador, I think you should see these psychological profiles. The civilians we rescued reported that their Vorthak captors became increasingly agitated and confused as our operation progressed. Zthar examined the data and found reports that the Vorthak guards had begun arguing among themselves about proper responses to human infiltration. Some wanted to follow defensive protocols while others demanded offensive action. Their command structure had apparently become deadlocked, trying to develop countermeasures for tactics that made no sense according to their military education. Your psychological warfare techniques were specifically designed for their species, Zthar realized with growing understanding and concern. Of course, Dr. Carter confirmed. We studied Vorthak social structures, decision-making processes, and fear responses for months before this mission. Then we created scenarios that would exploit their specific psychological vulnerabilities. You weaponized their own minds against them, Zthar said with something approaching horror. We used their expectations and assumptions to achieve our objectives with minimal violence, Jake corrected. The alternative would have been a direct assault that would have resulted in massive casualties among our forces, their forces, and the civilian hostages. Major Clark set down his empty coffee cup and looked directly at Zthar. Ambassador, let me ask you something. Would you prefer that we had fought a conventional battle with hundreds of deaths on all sides? Or are you satisfied with an outcome where everyone goes home alive? I prefer the outcome, Zthar admitted. But the methods you used seem to violate the fundamental principles of honorable warfare. Honor is a luxury that we cannot afford when innocent lives are at stake, Ryan said quietly. We fight to win, and we define winning as bringing our people home safely. Everything else is secondary to that objective. Dr. Carter displayed final psychological analysis results on the main screen. The Vorac forces have requested immediate evacuation from this system. They are offering to return all captured territory and provide reparations to the civilian population. Why would they make such generous offers after a single defeat? Zthar asked. Because they understand what they witnessed here, Jake replied. They know that fighting humans means dealing with unpredictable tactics, impossible infiltrations, and psychological warfare specifically designed for their species. They would rather negotiate than face us again. Ambassador Zthar felt his crystal body shift to deep blue as he contemplated the implications of what he had learned. 3 days after the rescue operation, Ambassador Zthar sat alone in his quarters aboard the UES Liberty, trying to write a report that would fundamentally change how the galaxy understood warfare. His crystal fingers moved slowly over the holographic keyboard as he struggled to find words that would convey the reality of what he had witnessed without causing panic across civilized space. The door chimed softly, and Lieutenant Lisa Brooks entered carrying a datapad and wearing the expression of someone who brought news that might be either welcome or disturbing. Her tactical analysis patch caught the light from the room's displays as she approached. Zthar's desk, Ambassador Captain Morrison. Thought you might want to see our official after-action report before you complete your own analysis, Lisa said as she handed him the datapad. There are some details that were not visible from the command center during the operation. Zthar accepted the device and began reading through the clinical military language that somehow made the impossible operation sound routine. The report documented 17 simultaneous infiltrations, 43 separate tactical innovations developed during the mission, and coordination between 68 different human units operating without centralized control. This level of operational complexity should have resulted in massive confusion and friendly fire incidents, Zthar observed. How did your forces maintain situational awareness across such a distributed operation? Shared training, common values, and what we call tactical empathy, Lisa replied. Every human in that operation could predict how their teammates would respond to changing conditions because they understood how humans think under pressure. The report included detailed psychological profiles of Vorac command responses during each phase of the operation. Zthar read with growing amazement how human actions had systematically dismantled enemy confidence while simultaneously protecting civilian lives and minimizing casualties on all sides. Your forces did not simply win a military victory, he said slowly. You redefined what victory means. That is exactly right, Lisa agreed. Most species define victory as defeating enemies and controlling territory. Humans define victory as achieving objectives while preserving what we value. A soft knock interrupted their conversation, and Dr. Helen Carter entered the room carrying her own datapad and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose research had produced significant results. Her xenopsychology patches indicated successful completion of a major analytical project. Ambassador, I have completed my psychological analysis of the Vorac responses to our operation, Helen said as she settled into a chair near Zthar's desk. The results support some interesting conclusions about the effectiveness of unconventional warfare against conventional military thinking. What did you discover? Zthar asked, though he suspected the answer would disturb him. The Vorac military command structure collapsed not because of physical damage, but because of conceptual failure, Helen explained. Their officers encountered situations that their training had taught them were impossible. When reality contradicted their education, they became unable to make coherent decisions. Zthar studied the psychological data and found evidence of something he had never seen before in military analysis. The enemy forces had not been defeated by superior firepower or tactical superiority. They had been defeated by their own assumptions about how warfare should function. You attacked their understanding of reality, he said with growing comprehension. We demonstrated that their understanding of reality was incomplete, Dr. Carter corrected. The Vorac assumed that all military forces would operate according to the same principles they had learned. When they encountered humans using human methods, their entire tactical framework became useless. Lisa activated a holographic display showing post-mission intelligence reports. The Vorac High Command has issued new standing orders regarding human military capabilities. They are now classified as an unpredictable variable that cannot be countered using standard military doctrine. More importantly, Helen added, they have requested formal peace negotiations and offered significant concessions to avoid future conflicts with human forces. Zthar felt his crystal structure shift through several colors as he processed the implications. They are not offering peace because they fear your military strength. They are offering peace because they fear your unpredictability. Unpredictability is strength when used correctly, Captain Jake Morrison said as he entered the room. May I join your discussion, Ambassador? I believe there are some aspects of our operation that might help you complete your report. Please, Captain, Zthar replied. I am struggling to understand how to explain what I witnessed without causing alarm among civilized species. Jake settled into the remaining chair and looked directly at the ambassador. What specifically concerns you about our methods? Everything, Zthar said honestly. Your forces violated established protocols, ignored traditional boundaries between military and civilian operations, and used psychological warfare techniques that most species would consider unethical. Yet you achieved a better outcome than any conventional military operation could have produced. That is exactly the point, Ambassador, Jake replied. Conventional methods produce conventional results. When conventional results mean acceptable losses of innocent lives, we choose unconventional methods. Dr. Carter leaned forward in her chair. Ambassador, let me ask you something. If the Altarian Collective faced a similar hostage situation, what would your government do? We would follow established protocols, Zthar answered. Formal negotiations, offers of tribute or prisoner exchanges, and, if necessary, a carefully planned military operation following galactic warfare conventions. How long would that process take? Lisa asked. Approximately 6 to 8 standard weeks for the diplomatic phase and another 4 to 6 weeks for military planning if negotiations failed. 10 to 14 weeks, Jake repeated quietly, during which time the hostages would remain in enemy hands facing unknown treatment and possible execution. Your civilized methods prioritize process over people. Our methods ensure that conflicts are resolved according to established law and precedent, Zthar said, but his voice lacked conviction. Our methods ensure that our people come home alive, Helen replied. We have discovered that the most civilized approach to warfare is the one that preserves the most lives and achieves lasting peace in the shortest time. Zthar examined the final statistics from the human operation. 0 civilian casualties, minimal military casualties, complete mission success, and voluntary enemy withdrawal from the contested system. No conventional military doctrine could have achieved such results. There is something else you should know, Lisa said as she activated another display. We have received formal requests from 12 different species asking for human military advisors to help restructure their defense forces. The Altarian Collective is among those making requests, Jake added. Your own government wants to learn human military methods. This revelation struck Zthar like a physical blow. His crystal body flashed through rapid color changes as he realized that his mission report would not be an academic analysis of alien military doctrine. It would be a recommendation that could reshape galactic civilization. What should I tell the Council? He asked. Tell them the truth, Dr. Carter replied. Human beings have developed military methods that achieve better results with less suffering than any conventional approach. We fight not to defeat enemies, but to eliminate the conditions that create enemies. Tell them that civilized warfare is an illusion, Jake added. True civilization lies in achieving the best possible outcomes for the most people in the shortest time. Sometimes that requires methods that appear uncivilized to outside observers. Lieutenant Brooks stood and prepared to leave. Ambassador, there is one more thing in our after-action report that you should consider. The Vorac have agreed to establish a joint commission for resolving future disputes through negotiation rather than military action. They prefer talking to fighting humans, Zthar observed. Everyone prefers talking to fighting humans, Jake said with a slight smile. That is exactly what we want. Our goal is not to win wars, Ambassador. Our goal is to make wars unnecessary. As the human officers left his quarters, Zthar returned to his report with new understanding. He wrote, The humans do not practice civilized warfare because they have transcended the need for it. They fight not to defeat enemies but to eliminate the conditions that create enemies. Their methods appear chaotic and brutal to civilized observers, but their results demonstrate a deeper understanding of conflict resolution than any species in the galaxy has achieved. He paused and then added, Recommendation: the Galactic Council should immediately begin studying human military doctrine and consider adopting their approach to protecting civilian populations. Avoiding conflict with humans is advisable, not because they are militarily superior, but because they are psychologically incomprehensible to conventional military thinking. 3 weeks after Zthar submitted his report, the Altarian Collective formally requested human military advisors. Within 6 months, 14 other species had made similar requests.